Hey guys, Abraham here. I just want to remind you guys that we upload all of our courses to Skillshare. Skillshare is this amazing site where you can access a ton of different content to learn, improve, and grow as an artist. We have all of our courses available to watch and learn from right now in Skillshare. You can check the description down here, and Skillshare is offering 1 free month trial to their premium membership. With this membership, you're going to be able to access all of our courses and watch and learn all of the amazing things that we cover with all of the softwares. So, what are you waiting for? Check Skillshare down here below. Hey guys, welcome back to the next chapter in this series. Today we're going to talk about rendering, and we're going to talk about cinematic light. So as you can see, I'm actually rendering right now, and I'm just trying to see how everything looks in regards to the previous lights that we have, and yeah, this is where we're going to be working from. So I'm going to show you my approach. We're going to save this image right here. I'm going to click on this little icon to save a snapshot of the image, and I'm going to show you the approach on how to light at these scenes. So let's close everything that we don't need. Let's go here to perspective view. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this scene as a different scene. I always like to keep or just increment and save. I always like to keep versions, as you saw throughout the course. Every now and then you might have a crash, you might do something that you didn't intend to, and there's no control C. So it's always good to have backups of your scene. So the first thing I like to do is I'm going to turn off every light on the scene that's not like a main light. That's not going to be there regardless of whatever I have. So for instance, this sky dome light, I'm actually going to turn it off. I'm going to bring the exposure back to -10. So that's pretty much no light at all. I'm going to go to the options here, and one thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change the size of the render from whatever we have right now. I'm going to keep maintain height width ratio. Let's go all the way down to 300 pixels only. Why am I doing this? Well, when you're trying or when you're rendering, one of the worst things that can happen is that you have to wait a long time for things to render, right? So if you can get quick renders fast, that's usually better than not being able to advance properly. So as you can see, in 3, 4, 5, 9 seconds in this case, I can get a really good idea of how things are going to look. Let's start with our close-up shot right here. And to do that, of course, we need to go to some of the first frames right here. So let's go to one of to this frame right here. There we go. So this is going to be one of the most important frames, right? Because this is when we are actually analyzing the tower here with the character. And you can see it already looks quite nice. I mean, it's not a bad approach. It's not a bad shot right now, but it's not perfect. I would like to have a little bit more light. And here's one of the big misconceptions that people have with 3D and with cinema and stuff like that. The amount of cheating that it's done to get proper lights or cool lights is, I mean, you guys would not believe it. People would literally point a spotlight to someone's face if they want specific kind of solution, even though that would never happen in the real world. So anytime you see a shot from a movie and even video games, just keep in mind that that's not something that's going to happen naturally. Okay, you're always going to have to be changing or modifying a couple of things. So for instance, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an Arnold lights, and I'm going to add an area light. This area light is going to be coming from the top, and I'm imagining this is some sort of a ceiling light or like a ventilator or something that's going to be up here, and it's going to be a round shape. It's going to be a disc shape right here. This one, I'm going to move it a little bit like this, and I'm actually going to point it a little bit more towards the character, even though that would not be the real way to do it, because I don't want straight shadows coming down. And now, if I increase the exposure, let's say something like 12, and I render, there's of course going to be a lot more light on the scene. 12 is not even there. Let's try 20. 20 is going to be way too much. Now this looks like daylight, and I don't want that. I want to have a nice, a moody light. So 15 right there. And one thing I can change is this thing called the spread. By default, all of the lights inside of Arnold have this open spread, so they're going to be launching light everywhere on the scene. But if I start focusing this by lowering this spread, what's going to happen is that it's going to look more like a spotlight, where this thing is just coming from the top and giving us this very nice effect right here. You can see the shine there on the character itself, and now this looks a little bit nice, more interesting. Another thing I can do is I can add temperature. We know about this. If we lower the temperature, it's going to look warmer, and if I up the temperature, it's going to be cooler. So I'm going to make this light a little bit warmer to make it a little bit more approachable and to have some contrast with the character. Now here's where I can again play with the intensity of the light and whether or not I want to shine it quite nicely on the character or not. I think going a little bit crazy here, something like a 16 might work quite nice. I like that one. That one looks interesting. Now, I know that my renders are taking a little bit less time that you might find on your own computer. Just be patient. It's one of those parts that you definitely need to be patient. Otherwise, well, things won't work. So yeah, there we go. I like this one. This is a nice setup for the light. Now let's add another one. Right now we're not using any dome light, so why not bring it in a little bit? So let's do -6, and now we're gonna have a little bit more reflections. If I see that there's too much light, what I can do is I can bring this down like even further and just start playing with the element. I have the light preview right now, and this allows me to find like the perfect balance, because I do want to have like this sort of like darkish effect on the whole thing. If you have two screens, I do recommend moving your render from one screen to the other, because sometimes it might look good on the screen and then on another one it might not look as good. So just keep that in mind. There we go. I think that's fine. Now, as you can see, we do have the TV over here, and I would expect to have a little bit of rim light on the character coming from the TV. But unfortunately, the TV doesn't have enough strength on its light to be generating that sort of effect. So here's again where we can use a little bit of fake effects. I'm gonna go Arnold, lights. I'm gonna do a sky dome light, or an area light again. A big panel light. Rotate this and move it to this side over here, like close to the TV. So where the TV would be launching its stuff. Definitely color temperature, definitely make it a lot bigger, and let's increase the exposure. Let's bring the spread down a little bit, and now when we render, what we should see, especially if we bring the exposure quite high to like a 16, is we should see a little bit of a reflection right here. Now the problem with this reflection is that it won't perfectly match the images on the TV, so the TV will be changing and the colors will be changing, and this one will remain exactly the same. But at least it's going to give us a very nice effect here on the characters, and as you can see on the table as well, right? It's going to make a little bit more sense on the table. Another thing we could of course do is maybe plug in the same like maybe that could work. Can we do that? Let's try that. If you guys remember, we have on this TV, we have the material, this file right here, which is TV file 1. Maybe we can plug that into the color. Should we try it? Should we try plugging that into the color? I think we should. So let's go to the hypershade. I actually haven't done this before, but I think we can do that. Let's bring this TV thing right here. So this is the texture that we want, which has the frames. And then if you go to the lights, you're gonna find this light right here. So let's rename this light to light TV. There we go. And now if we bring this light right here, we should have the we're not gonna be using color temperature. We're gonna be using light or color light. So let's plug this in right there. And now, okay, so that's white. If we go here, does that change? I think it does change. Yeah, like that's warm, and you can see like more warm light on the scene, like here. So there we go. That looks quite nice. The light on the TV will change the way things look here. So okay, that's a good one. I like that one. Now let's add one more light. I think it would be cool to have one more light coming on this side, because right now it's a little bit too dark. So again, I'm gonna go Arnold, lights, area light. We're gonna make a big area light. Maybe there's like a window, or maybe like if this is a basement, the door to the basement is open, and we're gonna have this sort of thing. Again, pointing towards our character. This one definitely is gonna be like light. Let's go again for like a 17 and a small spread, because I do want to have this sort of like a rim light coming from the back. Again, sort of like this. And this is what I mentioned before. Like, you're gonna do so many tricks on your lighting scenarios that this would never be a realistic way to do it in the real world. But even in the real world with films, they add so many lights and so many bounce lights and so many like camera effects and tricks that it's just part of the whole thing. So yeah, there we go. That's our cinematic light. Let's go to another. Let's go for like our shotgun, for instance. And yeah, even on the shotgun, this looks quite nice, like a center effect right here, and even on the where's the body shot, that's a nice effect. I like it. Right now it's looking way too blurry because of the amount of pixels. We're working with very few pixels, but I like how this is looking. Now, one thing we're gonna add as well, and this has to do with post-processing effects, is we're gonna add a little bit of like extra effects. But I want to keep this a separate videos, just so that you guys have ways to reference them later on. So yeah, on the next video I'm gonna show you about camera effects and post-process effects. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to talk about camera and post effects, so let's get to it. this is where we left off. Now I'm actually gonna go back to the like a better size with my element. We're gonna go back to like a half HD or HD 720, and let's start with the close-up. So I'm gonna go here back to the close-up shape, which is one of the most important ones, and this one is gonna allow me to show you the camera effects and the post effects. So as you can see, now with more pixels, we get the more information, things look a little bit nicer, they look cooler, and we're ready to talk about camera effects. So let's start with camera effects. The one camera effect I want to talk right now is something called a depth of field. I, again, don't remember if I showed this on the first section of the course. I think we might have. But depth of field is the distance that we have from the lens and the objects, and this allows us to have this sort of effect where something is in focus and everything else is kind of like blurry, and that gives a very cinematic look to things, because right now, as you can see, everything's in focus, and even though it looks okay, it doesn't look as realistic. So I'm gonna look for my camera, which is this one right here, the close-up shot, and down here on the options, on the attribute editor of the element, we can go to the Arnold options, and we can turn on this thing called depth of field. Now, we need to know how far away we are from the character, because the character is going to be the main focus. So the character right now is 95 units away from us, okay? And now if we go back to the camera here, we can say, hey, the focus distance is going to be 95 units away. And let's start with like a really big aperture size, with like a 1 aperture size. And if I hit play, what's going to happen now is you're going to see that the back part of the scene where the TV was, and even the front part here near the Jenga tower, is going to become like way more intense, right? Like more blurry, which looks quite interesting. It gives this very cool effect where we're actually focusing the character and only the character, and we're not paying attention to anything else. Now, if you want, you can exaggerate this. If we go for like a 5, what's going to happen is everything's going to be super blurry. This is not something that you would normally achieve with the camera, but it can be done. And I think what I want to do is the following. I'm going to go with a 2. I think a 2 is like quite strong. It's a quite strong like depth of field, but it's going to look quite nice. You can see the depth of field there on the TV is gone, and actually no, I think 1 was fine. Let's go with 1, which is more realistic. But what I want to do is maybe at the beginning of the animation, like right here, that's fine, everything's blurry. But once we hit like the Jenga tower, like once we start seeing the Jenga tower, like right here, I think it would be cooler if the Jenga tower was in focus. So I know that the Jenga tower is closer, so I'm gonna start with like 50 units here, which is the Jenga tower in focus. Look at that. Very cool, right? And what I can do is I can right click and set a keyframe so that this depth of field remains like that for a long time. Let's go all the way to frame 80 so that we keep focusing, or maybe frame 70 so that we can focusing the Jenga tower. As you can see, this is in focus. I'm gonna right click, set a keyframe, and then in 10 frames, from frame 70 to frame 80, we're gonna change this to 95. So we're gonna change the focus to the character so that when you see the character moving his head up and analyzing the last part of the tower, because we know that by frame 100 the character is going to be up, looking up, right? So now we're on his face and we're focusing on the face. So we can change the focus distance, we can animate the focus distance and create this very cool effect where, again, on the initial frames, what is in focus is the Jenga tower, and what's not in focus is the character, and then later on we make focus and we go all the way to the Jenga tower. So yeah, that's the first part. That's the camera effects. Now the post effects are actually quite easy, like super easy. Let me show you. I'm gonna stop this, and I do believe I changed something here, and I turn on the adaptive sampling. So I'm gonna remove them. So I'm gonna just hit play. I'm just gonna let this thing run with the basic samples. I'm not telling it to render more than it should. So as you can see, only 5 seconds in my case, and we get this very cool effect. But we have a couple of things that we'd like to change. First of all, the noise, right? Right now we have a lot of noise, a lot of grainy images, and even if we change this to 1920 by 1080, which is the biggest resolution we're going to be rendering at, it wouldn't really help us that much. But there's a very cool thing, and we've talked about this one before. It's the denoiser, right? So I'm going to go here into the display settings, and I'm going to add that denoiser optics. And by adding that, when I render now, the image is going to render, and then it's going to clean it. And as you can see, it does an amazing job. Like, look at this softness. Now, the problem is, since we did have a couple of big samples, that the denoiser is going to do a good job in cleaning the samples, but it might get like this splotchy, blurry images that then when we see the full video, we might see as just blurry images just moving around. So we definitely do want to bring the samples as high as possible as we can before we do this, but without compromising or without making render time extremely long. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to show you a couple of more images that we have. and those are here in the lens effect. So I'm going to add the lens effect imagers, and there's two lens effects that we can add. The first one I really like, which is the vignette, which is going to just like darken a little bit on the borders of the element. It's going to give more focus to the character. I think it's amazing. I think it's going to really bring this thing again into the more cinematic look of things. And finally this, the bloom. The bloom is really good for things that glow. So the lamp and the screen and stuff, as you can see, the bloom gives this very nice realistic effect. And you don't want to have like a lot of bloom, but just a little bit of bloom is always cool to really make things like flow a little bit more. I think I'm gonna go for something very simple, like a 0.1, just a little bit of bloom here and there, as you can see that. You can change the radius of the bloom, which is how big the bloom is. I think I am going to make it a little bit bigger. And you can change the threshold, which is when it detects that something is like shining. I don't think I want to change that one right now, because look at this. This looks like a really, really cool frame, really clean frame for our animation. So yeah, that's it. That's the first part of the animation. So the first 100 frames are pretty much ready. Our element right here is looking quite nice. Another thing we can do, for instance, is we can go to the first frame, and in the first frame, you guys remember that we're seeing like the back of the elements and everything's like super blurred. Why not select the camera and say, hey, you know what? Like maybe here, the aperture size is going to be set to 5, so really big. Everything's going to be like super blurry. No, actually no. It is going to be super blurry, but we're also going to be seeing other things. No, that's fine. We'll just leave it at the one. I was thinking about maybe just like leaving this as a sort of like a really high element and then bringing it up. I think this is fine. It's just like a very dark silhouette, kind of like what's going on. And then we just keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. It's just a couple of seconds until we see the face, we see the Jenga tower, and this is going to give us this very cool looking like introduction to the frame, right? To the play, to what's going on here on the little film. So yeah, that's it, guys. Now, well, no, that's not it. Actually, we need to go now to the other camera. So we're gonna go to the full frame camera. Let's do a pan. Let's look through selected, and here the objects are at 211 units away. And since this is a more open shot, we're not gonna be using that much of. We shouldn't be using that much depth of field. So I'm gonna go again to the camera here. Let's go all the way down to Arnold. Let's turn on depth of field. It's going to be 210, and the aperture, instead of 1, it's going to be like 0.5. We're going to be using a higher aperture. And now let's go to like a frame where these things fall. Well, since we're going closer, you can see probably 200 might be a better number for my depth of field, because we're going to be getting closer and closer, and we always want to keep the character in focus. And let's render this, and let's see how this looks. Okay, that looks cool. And in general, the atmosphere looks cool. I mean, we can see the TV, we can see the furniture over here. I'm thinking about whether or not we can get away with a little bit more aperture. Let's try 1 aperture as well. Maybe we can get away with it and it shouldn't affect that much, so that we blur the TV a little bit more, because I definitely don't want that to be the center of attention. Yeah, that looks good. We're still using the denoiser, and we're still using this lens effect, so we still have the little bloom right there, and we have the little vignette, which is giving us this very cool, warm cinematic light. Now, we can still do more like color corrections and stuff later on inside of After Effects at the very end of the whole scene. But yeah, this looks quite nice. Let me stop this right here, and let's go to the final frame. The final frame is always an important one, or at least on the final frames, to see how the final pose or the final element is going to be. And that looks cool. I like that one. Where he's like, oh. Nice. So yeah, there we go. That's pretty much it. Our scene is ready, our animation is ready, and we're ready to jump onto batch rendering. So I'm gonna stop the video right here, guys, and I'm gonna show you the next important step, which is calibrating, like properly calibrating renders, so that you know how long, or roughly how long, it's gonna take before you send this to the final render. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of this series. Today we're going to talk about batch render, how to export all of this information out into the world so that we can see the final renders, and we'll just show everyone all of the hard work that we've done so far to learn Maya. So first things first. First, we need to know how long is it taking to actually render a frame, and how clean is that frame being. So I'm going to change this to HD 1080, and we're going to render this frame, which has a lot of the information that we're going to eventually have. And if I render this frame, I'm going to be able to see roughly how long it's taking and how clean it's getting, okay? Now, remember, we are using a denoiser, and the denoiser it's pretty much like magic. I love using denoisers because they save so much time, but a denoiser can only do so much. The cleaner you give, or the cleaner the image you give to the denoiser, the better the work it's going to be able to do. So right now, as you can see, this took 20 seconds to render. And if I take a look at this as a still, this looks perfectly fine. But if I turn off the denoiser for just a second, you're going to see that we still have a lot of noise. So I know from experience that all of this noise is going to create a lot of like splotchiness and things that are going to be moving around, and the image is going to look like it's jiggling from all of that like smudges that the denoiser is going to have. So I definitely want to bring this thing closer to a cleaner look. Now, the first thing in how we're going to calibrate this is, of course, by using the samples over here. And I'm going to be using the adaptive samplings. Now, right now, as you can see, we have 3 samplings. So if we bring this down to 3, right there, it should match pretty much the same amount of time. So it should take only 20 seconds in my computer to render this image. And again, this is, of course, computer dependent, so I apologize if the scene is a little bit heavy for some of you guys. I know that it could be because there's a lot of textures. My recommendation there, either be very patient and wait until everything is finished, or try down sampling the size. Instead of doing full HD, try half HD or 1 color HD, just so that you get the information out. So yeah, as you can see, with 3 samples, we get this. And again, the denoiser is going to do a good job of cleaning the scene, but the noisier it is, the more difficult it's going to be for the denoiser, and the more obvious it's going to be for us to have. Now, that's something I didn't want to see. It seems like the block right there is present. Oh yeah, because we're in the final scenes. Okay, I thought we were in the initial scenes. No, that's fine. So again, if we take a look at this, one thing we can do is we can increase the time here. Let's say double. Let's go for 6. Okay, so we're gonna do 6. Right now it took 15 seconds at 3 samples. If we do 6 samples at this amount of noise, 0.015, which is a good landmark, I'm expecting this to take either twice or 3 times as long. So it took 15 seconds before. Now it's probably gonna be like 45 seconds and so. But the one thing that you want to look at is take a look at how much the light cleans this up. Because if you see a lot of movement like what I'm seeing right now, then that means that this is going to be useful because it's going to make the denoiser's works a lot easier. If you see that the noise is not changing as much, then you're probably at the golden point where you can stop upping the samples and you can just let the denoiser do its job. But right now, I'm still seeing a lot of lights like here and there, like cleaning stuff. So by increasing this, I definitely recommend having this. Another thing we can do, by the way, which I think I am going to do, is we can reduce how much the denoiser is actually helping the scene. So right now, for instance, it took 48 seconds. I think 48 seconds is perfectly fine. That means that if my calculations are correct, this thing is going to take 360 minutes roughly to render, which is 5 hours. So a 15-second animation with this quality in 5 hours, I think that's a win for me. So one thing we can do is we can say, hey, you know what? I do want to use the denoiser, but maybe not 100% of the denoiser. Maybe I just want to do like 66% or 75% of the denoiser. That way, we're still going to get a little bit of noise, and we're not going to get as much smudges. So I think we're going to go with this, with like a 0.7 denoiser. So we get a little bit of noise. I do like having noise because it looks like grain in films. And I think it's going to help the overall scene. So we're going to keep it like this. It's still going to take the same amount of time. It's still going to take 48 seconds. But now that lets me know that even if I needed a little bit more samples, it's not going to be as noticeable because it's just going to look like small little noise here and there. So yeah, there we go. This is the render right now. This is the time. So I know that we're good. One of the things that I always recommend, try doing a couple of renders throughout the timeline, like every 15 frames or every 100 frames, just to make sure that you're not missing anything. Play this back, like make sure that you don't have anything like weird going on. For instance, I can see that the screen is working fine. I can see that everything's working fine, and then there we go. So for instance, one thing I'm seeing there is that the animation stops, like the TB animation stops. And that might be something that I don't want to see stop, right? Like maybe I would like the animation to keep on going. I don't think we have a loop, to be honest, on the scene animation. I don't think we have a loop, unfortunately. So what else can we do? We could duplicate this guy and then make it appear. Now that's gonna make things a little bit more complicated. I think we're gonna roll with this. Maybe someone paused the video and that's it, but I think we're gonna roll with this. Oh no, you know what? Yeah, because when we are seeing the, what's the word? When we're seeing the close-up, we're actually not seeing the TV, right? if we go to the robot here, panels, look to selected, we don't really see the TV. I mean, we see it a little bit, but it's so brief and it's so like out of focus that here we could actually get away with this thing just being an image. We don't actually need to see the whole thing. We could see it until we hit frame 100. So what we can do is we can go to the TB, and there's an option here on the color option where we can offset this by 100 frames. There we go. Or actually minus 100 frames. So what's going to happen is there's not going to be an image until we hit a frame 100. So as you can see in frame 100, we do get the image. Another thing is, where do we actually see the TV? We see it in frame 20 or roughly, but that's fine. So in frame 100, 101, that's when we're actually going to see the animation. And I know that the animation is going to run. It's going to run pretty much at the same time as the Jenga falls down. So that's kind of fun. Yes, we're going to have like a couple of dead pixels there at the end. We can maybe say, hey, you know what? No, we can't. We can move it. But the problem is we do need to have another version of the TV with this image, right? Like with just a single image. So what's the easiest way to do that? Duplicate. This is where I mentioned that there's so many tricks and tips that we do throughout the way. So let's frame the TV screen. I'm going to duplicate this TV screen. And then this TV screen right here, we're going to call it TV screen, TV close up. We're going to go to frame 0. We're gonna set the visibility key selected, and then on frame 100 we're gonna key select again, and then on frame 101 we're gonna set this to off, and then here we're gonna assign a new material, Arnold standard surface. Is gonna be M screen static, and then on the color we're gonna have from our images the image sequence. Remember this one? We're just gonna grab the first one, hit open, and then on the emission it's gonna be turned on. I believe it was set to 3, and the color is also gonna be the same image. So images sequence, it's this one. There we go. And that's it. So this thing is going to be on the front, and then in frame 100 it's going to disappear, and we're going to see the other one. Now for the other one, this one I probably do need to turn it off as well. So in frame 100, let's set this to off, key selected. Actually no, it should be on here, but in frame the 99, this is going to be set to off, key selected, and then one frame after that it's going to be on, and that's the animation that we're going to see. Cool. So throughout this whole thing, this is going to be set to, now let's just make sure that the animation, yeah, it's 3. So throughout the whole first section, we're going to have the TV just on a still frame, which is going to be like blurred. We're not going to even see it. That's fine. And then once this animation starts, we're going to see the whole thing starting. And as you can see, it's actually going to be almost at the same time of the fall there, right there, which is quite funny, I would say. Quite funny that we were able to match that. So let's Control S real quick because we haven't saved. And then now let's go back to the renderer, and let's take a look at how long it would take to do a close-up shot. So let's go to like frame 80, let's do a close-up shot, and let's hit a render. It is important to know how long each type of shot is going to take, because it's not always the same thing. Like sometimes when you have a lot of elements on screen, it's going to take a little bit longer, something's going to take a little bit less, so it all depends. So that's why you definitely want to do a quick check on how long it's taking for each specific shot, so that you get, well, the most approximated effect. So for instance, right now we saw that for the first type of frame it was like roughly a minute in my system, and for this one, again with 0.7 on the image denoiser, we're almost approaching a minute. Usually close-ups, when you have more objects, when there's more objects occupying the screen, usually close-ups take a little bit longer. So this might take like maybe 2 hours or 3 hours. And again, that's gonna say, or that's gonna tell me that the whole thing, it might not be 5 hours. It might be 6, 7, or 8 hours that's gonna take for the full render. Which again, it's quite impressive for a single computer, because a couple of years ago it was almost impossible to do this sort of things in a single system. So Yeah, there we go. So this is 51 frames, so it's a little bit longer than the other one. We do have a little bit of noise, which is fine. We mentioned that we like having those noises. And yeah, it's now time to render this. So how are we going to render? Very, very easily. We're going to go into the main settings over here, into the render settings. We're going to go to common. Make sure it's set to the proper areas right here. And up here, we're going to say output transform, name, number, and extension. We're gonna have the name of the scene, which is game room final animation .001.001.1. Well, in this case, it's trying to do like the name. So let's save the scene as, and let's save the scene as robot render. There we go. Now if we go here, you can see that it's gonna be saving as at robot render.001.exr.001.0.exr. For simplicity's sake, and again, just to keep things a lot more like easier, I'm gonna change the format. Now we're not gonna do number. We're gonna do EXR. I'm gonna do Targa, or TIFF in this case. TIFF is a really nice system because every single TIFF file is the same size. So if you have all of the system or all the files and you check the size and you see that some of them don't match the same size, that means that you mess something up and that you only need to re-render that one. And that's one of the big questions that a lot of people ask. Do we render frames or do we render a video? We render frames, and that's due to a lot of different reasons. But one of the most important ones is if the render fails, you don't want to start over from the very beginning, right? Imagine you're doing like a 20-hour render and it fails at the 19-hour. You're gonna have to start over if you were doing a video. So you always want to do a image sequence and then use another software, which I'm going to be showing you After Effects. Use another software to paste all of those images together and get the result that you're going for. So in this case, we're going to start with the first sequence, and I'm going to call this 1 to 100. I should actually rename the scene. So save scene as, and I'm going to call this robot render sequence A. So that when we render this, we get this robot render sequence A.001 TIFF, okay? And we know this is gonna be 100 frames, right? We start at frame 1 or frame 0, and then we go all the way to 100 to frame 100. Let's start at frame 0. I think frame 0 is fine. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, do not make the mistake of going here to Arnold and doing batch render, which is an option that we have over here. Where is it? It should be somewhere around there. We're not going to be using a batch render because to use a batch render, that means that you're usually going to use like a render farm. And unfortunately, unless you get a license from Arnold, which is quite pricey, you won't be able to use render farms. However, if you are working on a single computer, you can still do something called render sequence. But to do that, we need to jump on this little eye right here, which is the Maya render view. So we go to the Maya render view and we're going to say render sequence and click here. Make sure, this is super important, make sure that on the options you select the option of the camera that you're going to do. In this case, that's the close-up shot, right? We're going to robot close-up shot. Super important. I made this mistake so many times and it hurts so much to set the render, start the render, go for a drink, go for a eat or something, and then come back a couple of hours later and then you realize that you did the wrong camera. Make sure you select the right camera. As you can see, it's going to render from frame 0 to frame 100 on the close-up shot camera with 1920 by 1080 with the denoiser active, and it's going to save it on your images folder. That's also important. And then I like to do this. I like to move this thing out of the way because you're actually going to see the preview of your frame right here, and just hit render sequence. That's it. Now what's going to happen, and this is why I was saying 1 minute instead of 48 seconds or 51 seconds, the image is actually going to be rendering with Arnold, and then it's going to import it into Maya, and then Maya is going to output it to the folder. So that little conversion that you do there, it's usually going to take a little bit of extra time that you might have not accounted for. So even if it said 48 seconds and you're like, oh, this is just multiply this by the number of frames, always add a little bit of extra time because when you save the file, when you export the file, it takes a little bit longer. Now, rendering takes so much energy from your computer, so as soon as you hit render, make sure you turn off any other software. Don't play, don't go into YouTube, don't go into Facebook, just let your computer do its job, especially if it's a laptop, because laptops really heat up when they do this, and if you try to stress it more with other softwares open, it's gonna definitely crash, and you can even get like a blue screen of that. So make sure to just let Maya do its stuff. As you can see, it took 51 seconds, it saves, and then it starts again with the next frame. And this is going to take, in this case, 100 minutes to do this 100 frames. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to stop the video right here. I'm going to let my computer finish the renders, both renders. So I'm going to be back in several hours. And then we're going to talk about how to import all of these things into After Effects and do the last part of that bit, which is a little bit of music, a little bit of transitions, and just like just like general stuff at the end. Okay, so yeah, that's it for now, guys. The batch render information is now done, and make sure to get all the way to this point if you're following along. I'll see you back on the next video. Bye bye.